I'm ready.
All right.
Ready? We are on our first road trip of 2023. It's actually
Yes.
the first week of 2023.
That's right.
And you and I are in San Jose
San Jose, yes.
at Nutanix World Headquarters with Nutanix's
Lee
what's your
Caswell.
title?
SVP of Product Marketing.
SVP of Product Marketing, Lee Caswell. And we talked to Lee quite a bit. I think
Many
last time we
times, yeah.
spoke was at HP Discover. We did a-
2022,
did a
yeah.
video right on the floor. I want to start off. You've been with Nutanix just about a year.
About a year, yeah.
About a year. Good move?
It's been a great move. It's been a great move. I love bringing new technologies to market. And, one of the interesting things was watching the evolution of what started off as hyper-converged infrastructure, which is, essentially getting a web-scale server-based software-defined system, right? And, that's super exciting because modern infrastructure is based on servers,
Yep.
right?
That's right.
So you see that. So that's interesting. But then watching this next wave of adoption happening, the Nutanix architecture turns out, right, is ideally suited for taking performance workloads that were typically on 3-tier architecture SAN level products. And so watching this architecture now with full snapshot replication data services, like take this market on and accelerate right now, super fun.
It's interesting because, for even when virtualization first came out, even up until very recently, there were always those sacred cows when it came to, right, what you threw in an environment and what you kept kind of either bare metal. And it's like Nutanix seems to be breaking all that down, right? Database driven, very, low latency kind of driven applications now.
Yeah, I think, in the early days of virtualization, compute virtualization, right?
Yes.
We watched that the first applications weren't databases.
Right.
First applications were like DHCP servers, print servers, file servers, right? And we used to call them crap applications, actually, right? So, and then what happened though, within 5 years, as the performance got tuned, people were like, hey, this approximates bare metal from a performance standpoint, and I get all the management benefits.
Yep.
And so all of a sudden the dynamic, the calculus changed from what can I put onto virtualization to what can't I put onto virtualization.
Right.
And there were certain things like the sacred cows were like AIX. You weren't putting that in a virtualized environment, right? But the idea was that you basically looked and said, everything that I can put on virtualization, I will. And that's what's happening with HCI, right? So, this company of the last 10 years has taken this from the VDI workloads, which were great, out of the data center. Data's not that critical, right? These are OS images. But now, right, performance workloads, right? SQL Server #1, other databases, all the way to SAP's now certified us for SAP HANA, right? Highest performance in memory databases, right? So you say, hey, listen, any workload can run on an HCI environment. So let's go take a look at, for the first time, people are talking about cost. Right? Last 3 years, nobody mentioned cost.
Nope.
Money was free.
Yeah.
Well, it's not happening these days, right? So all of a sudden, HCI is now way up in the food chain right about thinking, hey, how do I go and be relevant for the next 5 years?
So, and people's expectations of HCI have also changed over the last decade. When Nutanix started off, it was an on-prem, in-the-box HCI solution.
That's right.
And now every enterprise is hybrid multi-cloud.
Well, that's the thing, right? So, 10 years ago, people were thinking like on-prem or cloud, right? And so, if people are thinking that today, we're like, boy, you really got to get with it, right? Because it turns out data people know that data is likely to be distributed.
That's right.
Because of the nature of data, right? It's not fast and free to move it. Basically, there are egress fees depending on where you press it, where you put it in place. And data sovereignty is a pretty important issue, right? So now as you start thinking, well, the data is likely to be distributed and the applications, what's interesting is as you have multiple points of presence, almost I'm calling them, right? You start thinking the value now is in having a platform that connects these.
That's right.
And so you'll see us start, we've talked a lot about HCI as the infrastructure piece, even though we're a software company, right? Now you're going to be hearing us talk more about the platform, right? And the platform is what gives you these different points of presence where, hey, we've got the data center, of course, strong center for us, right, with over 24,000 customers. You got the cloud right now with AWS and Azure supported. But then also we've got data showing that 50% of data is going to be at the edge.
Right.
So you're thinking that's a lot of endpoints, right? It used to be like Robo. So as you start thinking about that platform element means that, hey, I've got this same flexibility regardless of where the data and the applications are going to be.
And building on a framework such as Nutanix's, that removes me from a lot of the dependencies I might have with a cloud provider, for example.
Yes. Well, so you start thinking, listen, we're seeing customers take a very considered approach to what applications they introduce as like PaaS level, right? Where you're actually taking individual discrete services, and there's some very powerful ones by individual cloud companies, and those are going to be probably specific to that cloud forever, right? So think about that. But then there are other applications where you think, hey, like maybe I want to move those over time or expand them. I acquire a company and I have got to get to a new region, right? I want to expand that presence, right? And I can do it with Nutanix with portable licensing, for example, that works, and integrated networking, right, that works across those different locations. So all of a sudden I started thinking, for power, for cost, for performance, and for data sovereignty, let me characterize my apps and look at which ones I might want to move across to that hybrid cloud infrastructure.
When we talk about hybrid cloud, it's not just on-prem and public cloud.
Right.
We're in the middle right now of a dramatic rise of as a service, typified by HP GreenLake, right? They kind of set the bar.
Yeah, and
you have a relationship, strong relationship.
HPE's been a terrific partner for us, right? And in part, it started because of great hardware, but pretty quickly, right, it moved into, hey, this as a service model, consumption based. And the reason that's important, and actually tied to our value proposition, is that customers are having increasingly difficult times planning. Right? Trying to predict the future, right? Who could guess we're here where we are a year ago even, right? So you start thinking, well, how do I go and make sure that I'm protected for the degrees of freedom I'm most likely to exercise?
That's right.
So those start looking like this, like, hey, I might need different protocols, not just blocks, but I need blocks and files and objects. Instead of buying different architectures, how do I have one platform, right, that goes and gives me extensibility? Nutanix can do that. Right, that's the sort of thing that you start thinking about. Containers is another one, right? How do I have containers and VMs supported with a common platform? That gives you a solve, so you just don't explode all of the operating costs that you'd have otherwise.
I love also the idea of Nutanix and HPE providing that cloud operating model, right? So we talk about this quite a bit, where you talk about being able to forecast a year out from a capacity perspective. Never mind that. What new apps, right? What killer apps are going to invade the enterprise next, and how do I support those? Enterprise IT already has a skills gap, right?
Right.
That time to value, that time to turning on new services is greatly reduced.
Well, this is a market change from the days. Do you remember when ERP systems and CRM systems, we used to plan like around 5-year time horizons? So you'd come in and you'd say, hey, listen, what do I plan? I'll build that out and I'll bleed that asset down, right? Sweat it out for the next 5 years, right? Well, that's not the day. If you just take your phone, how many applications have you opened today?
Oh, right.
Is it more than a year ago? Probably, right? So you start thinking like, hey, how do I go and keep up with the developers? And that's what's happening across the board, is you want to be able to make sure that IT is not in the business of saying no. Right? And the reason we say no, by the way, is pretty good reasons, right? Day 2 operations, security, compliance reasons, right?
Compliance,
and actually, right now, cost. Right? Hey, make sure. So what happens, right, is I see many customers making sure that their IT departments remain relevant as the pace of application development increases. So now, like, you've got this wave of new applications. How do I make sure that I can go provide all of that value and make sure it can go and be delivered at like today's pace of application development?
While just put a close on that, while simplifying the management aspect for enterprise IT.
Right, because listen, it turns out, right, if you have to have someone who's expert in every individual thing, right? I kind of go back to the days, remember when we had scanners and printers and copiers and faxes, and everyone had a different UI.
Steve still does, by the way.
Well, so consolidating all that, right, all of a sudden said, hey, this is the great solve, right, for how do I do one thing, and I can power it in one place, manage it as a single thing. This is what HCI does. It allows you to manage across multiple locations for different applications and do it all from a common interface, so you don't explode out that OpEx profile.
And I don't have to sacrifice performance. You run bare metal on AWS?
This is
not AWS, on Azure. Sorry.
Well, yeah, so bare metal on Azure, right, was jointly engineered between Nutanix and Azure. And the reason, it was interesting because, we weren't first in this, right, to go and be able to run on Azure. But to be able to run on this jointly engineered system, we were first. And the reason why was integrating with a network stack, right, ExpressRoute, was incredibly important to be able to extend the network across this hybrid cloud architecture. And that's what's interesting, is giving you speed. right? So we're showing that you can actually get to cloud faster.
Yeah.
We have a lot of customers who are kind of rebound.
Yeah.
People said, oh, I don't need to meet with you anymore because I'm going all in on the cloud. And now we're coming back and saying,
Well,
it's a year later,
yeah.
and I was trying to get like 200 applications, and I've got 9 done.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and my options are either I pay like a service provider a ton of money. How do I figure this out?
Yep.
Well, so what we're offering them, right, is the idea to go and rehost without replatforming or refactoring.
Yeah.
And that's a really important element. That's what gives you the flexibility to say, I can move it, I can manage it from a single common management plane,
Yeah.
right? And then, that flexibility to say, I may want to move it again over time.
Yeah.
You can do that, right, without any penalties here.
Excellent.
It's really a rationalization of your cloud or of your environment, right? It's what you said, regardless of the endpoint.
Well, I was you go through a holiday meal, like a Christmas meal, right? And you're like, you race to get the dishes in the dishwasher, right? And all of a sudden you're like, hey, they didn't fit, and I got a lot more left. What do? You go back and you start re-optimizing things so you can go and figure this out, right? This is what's happening on applications that were developed in the cloud.
Yeah. Yep.
I basically did it super fast, and now you got the bills coming in
Yeah.
and the skills.
Yep.
And you're like, hey, how do I take care of that bills and skills gap?
Yeah.
It turns out HCI is a really good way to go and optimize over time for what makes a little more sense.
That's a good point.
So a few minutes ago, you were listing off all of the attributes that an IT guy is looking for in a solution. And you missed the one that I think is driving a lot of conversations today, which is sustainability.
Great.
Do you have a play? How does that?
Yeah, you can start thinking about, consolidation by its very nature, right, helps you eliminate individual silos of underutilized assets, right? And you'll see more from us this year because it's a very hot topic around our customers, right? I mean, I think intuitively it's obvious, right, that as you took that kind of scanner, printer, fax, brought those together, right, you can eliminate separately powered fiber channel infrastructure, right, or SAN and NAS systems that are separate today, right? You can bring that together, and you can also optimize it over the kind of that unpredictable workloads, right? So you've got a better chance of getting optimal performance or optimal capacity, which can help drive sustainability. The other aspect, though, is probably more interesting in an operating model, which is that if you use an HCI system, which are x86 server-based increments, the cost of being wrong is actually pretty nominal.
Right.
Yeah. So let's say I need more performance or capacity. I didn't just buying the wrong thing in a storage construct is pretty expensive, and it's kind of a CIO and CFO level. Like, hey, I messed up. This is basically a lot simpler than that, right? I can seamlessly expand the system.
Yeah.
One of the big value propositions, right, early on in VDI, by the way, right, was that hey, I could seamlessly scale this as I added more VDI instances and do it cost effectively and seamlessly. Well, that same value proposition now today says, hey, let's say I have a new container-based set of applications and I want to bring those in. Awesome, great, let's go do that, right? Our partnerships there, and there we work with HPE and also with Red Hat, right? A great opportunity to bring those partnerships together and help deploy this. A lot of that, by the way, we see that growth happening at the edge.
Yeah.
And you'll see this happening in AI ML in the future.
Yeah.
Right? Thinking about training in the cloud, inferencing at the edge.
Yeah. Right.
It's a very very thoughtful way of thinking, hey, how does AI ML come into the enterprise? And how do enterprise IT organizations remain relevant? Right? In an environment where that's going to be a more cost-effective way than having it all be in the cloud natively.
Well, and I going back to something you talked about earlier with GreenLake as well as, one of the reasons why AI ML has not really taken hold. There's so many projects that have started in the enterprise that have, stalled because there's skills gap, bills gap, right? That's what you referenced, right?
Exactly.
If I can rely on a partner like Nutanix with a trusted ecosystem partner like HPE with GreenLake to come in, understand what I need, optimize that, deploy it. It's point and click simplicity for me as an IT person.
Yes.
Right? You're taking the heavy lifting, lowering my costs.
And one of the ways we're doing that, right, is we're prioritizing what we call workflows, right? And the workflows, natural language processing is an important one. You can see this coming into financial services, right, into any of the travel, retail, manufacturing environments. And then the other one is, computer vision, right? So how do you think about that being deployed? And we're going to see this across retail environments, right, around how do you make a retail experience like somehow better than going on the web and just buying something right over a point and click, right?
Yep.
So that idea of like, I'm going to go into a store and have a customized experience, right, with coupons delivered to me. Listen, these are areas of the future, but we're going to see this become real, right, as you basically bring the cost down and allow you to do this in a way that says that training in the core, or at the cloud, inferencing at the edge is a way to cost effectively deliver this across the distributed edge.
Yeah. So, kind of changing gears a little bit, Steve and I went to our first .next conference, and what was it, 2018 or so? And it was, I mean this in a positive way, but it was almost cult-like. You're following, you have dedicated customers who are very enthusiastic, right?
In every earnings, you publish your NPS. You're sitting
right, which is unheard of, right? And I learned why we have that, by the way, but we'll come back to that.
Well, why is that? And that's part one. And part two is, is there a specific company type, like a typical Nutanix customer? Is it size-wise, vertical-wise, geo-wise? Or?
Yeah, I think in the early days, right, Nutanix really appealed to the kind of commercial customer, maybe smaller enterprise customer, who was looking for like kind of an escape valve, right? Yeah. They were looking for a way to go and get like a cloud-like experience without going to the cloud, or to get experience that gave them an enterprise-level IT capabilities, but without an enterprise level wallet.
Yeah, right.
Right? Yeah. That's kind of the early days, right? Now, bringing performance in, all NVMe performance, right, to rival the top stands, right, it was like a key element of this. But what I found, right, interesting is that with the Broadcom situation right now, things have materially changed for the VMware customer base. That is that there's a huge element of kind of risk that was never there. VMware was always the safe bet, and it's a great company, right? It has great products, but the idea that all of a sudden, right, we haven't seen a merger of this sort of disparate companies, right, since Oracle bought Sun.
Right.
I mean, you remember those?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was kind of the shock. I think people were shocked, right, to see that, like, how is it possible, right, that these two companies are coming together? And, Sun was a bastion of innovation, right, all new ideas and everything. But, within a year, right, I mean, it was Oracle, right, and there was no doubt. And, right, the products were serving Oracle products. And, there's all the things that kind of happened from there that was providing risk to VMware the customer base today. And so that's what we're seeing, right? There's a lot of customers coming to us. One of the things I heard recently that I thought was interesting is, very large enterprise customers coming in saying, hey, we really are looking at HCI as a way to be relevant 5 years from now, right? And what we want to know from you is, can you be not greenfield at small scale? Anybody can do that.
Right.
But we need you to bring brownfield at large scale. Can you do that? And so we're like, well, listen, if you want to run vSphere today and run our AOS stack, have at it. We're not pressing you to do that. About half our customers do that, by the way. Although in our last quarter, 61% bought HV.
Really?
Yeah, so you're watching this like now starting to fit. And so similarly, right, our Carbon product, right, supports Kubernetes orchestration. But we're also partnered, right, preferentially with Red Hat, for example. And our company has provided different hardware options, but our relationship with HPE has soared, right? As you looked at the value that our two companies brought together to a Venn diagram overlap, right? That's almost one to one, right? So you look at this and think, gosh, there's a really interesting play for how you manage risk over the long term. And so I think the Broadcom situation, right, is probably the most concerning. Price is usually the first thing that customers are worried about. But secondly is support. And when you've talked about NPS, one of the things that's interesting is this company has a very, Nutanix has a very different approach to support, which is, a complete ownership of the customer. And that is really different. And I've seen, the NPS scores that we have, don't forget, the range is from minus 100 to plus 100, right? And we're at 90 for 7 years in a row.
That's right.
That says there's something structurally different about what we're doing here. And probably the biggest risk is that things that work really well, customers kind of say, well, it can't be that hard.
Right.
Well, do you know what I'm saying, right? And so now the option, right, or the opportunity for us is to show that same experience, right, is available now that there's a compelling reason for VMware customers to consider an alternative.
All right. Well, Lee, thanks for taking the time.
It's awesome to talk to you guys, and Happy New
Thank
Year.
you so much. Happy New Year.
And if we don't see you before, we'll definitely see you. I think it's in Chicago.
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
In May.
All
Thank you
right.
for not doing it in Vegas.
I know.
I know. Chicago in May is pretty good.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.